This is Pick Up the Mic podcast on WWMVLP 95.5 and Radio 22. This is Pick Up the Mic podcast. I'll be your host, Corey Whitmore. This podcast aims to bring new voices into the conversation about how to eliminate racial disparities in education in the Madison Metropolitan School District. Over the past couple of months, we've had numerous interviews with African-American high school juniors and seniors, principals, teachers, mental health therapists, to give us more perspective on how we start this conversation and how we find potential solutions. Before we get started with episode 1, I did want to talk a little bit about my background and my interest in this topic of racial disparities in education. As a youth growing up, I was a part of 4 different school districts. My family moved around a lot. So before I went to college, I was in 4 different school districts. The last school district or the last area being Madison. So I was here for my sophomore through senior year before I went off to college. For half my life, I've been involved with youth and teens in some capacity, whether it is after-school programming, summer programming, coaching. I love talking and conversing with youth and being a resource for them the best that I can. It's something that I've always enjoyed and something that I believe has kept me grounded. My particular interest in this topic really came about when I moved back here to the Madison area about 5 years ago. And I was seeing in, some of the papers and things of that sort that the achievement gap, this opportunity gap that was around when I was here in school a number of years ago is still going on right now. And that it didn't seem as if the gap had closed that much from when I went to school, went to high school here to now. And I wanted to dig deeper and I really wanted to find out why. And to be able to do that, I wanted to go, at least not right away, go to teachers or administrators. I wanted to go to the youth. I wanted to go to high school juniors and seniors. And why high school juniors and seniors? Because I believe that they have the capacity to critically analyze some of the things that they've gone through and had to experience being in the district, possibly can create and think of some solutions of how to fix those problems and how to close that gap. Sometimes, when you're looking to fix something, sometimes it's best to go directly to those that are going through it, that are experiencing it. They have firsthand knowledge of what's going on, and that's what we try to do in this podcast. You'll hear from a wide range of seniors. We interviewed about 25 different African-American high school juniors and seniors during this podcast, and really dove into the issues. We talked about the achievement gap, the opportunity gap, how they felt about standardized testing if it was biased, what's the importance of having Black teachers. We talked about code switching, the learning environment in which they're in, what role does the community play, but ultimately, what solutions do you have to help start to close this gap? What advice could we possibly give the school board or our new superintendent to help point them in the right direction? And I hope we were able to achieve that with this podcast. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I loved putting it together. The kids and the community leaders, teachers, principals, mental health therapists, they were amazing. They gave amazing interviews, and these kids are candid. They don't hold back, and I am so appreciative that they felt comfortable enough to share their experiences with us and with you, the listener. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. Let's get to episode 1. All right, episode 1, the achievement gap. What is it? Why is it important? I went away. I moved away for college I moved to Milwaukee for about 16 years. And then recently, about 5 years ago, came back to the Madison area. And I started to see here and there, these articles, and they all talked about achievement gap, testing scores, achievement gap, graduation rates. And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at it and I'm like, what is going on here? And I'm looking at it over the time and I'm remembering my experience in high school, and there's disparities then. There's racial disparities, and they were even speaking of an achievement gap and how it was a crisis, and we needed to address that. And they put out some possible solutions to address it. And I come back now 16 some years later, and they're still going through the exact same thing. So let's go ahead and let's dive into it, and let's start with the students. So I asked the students, if they knew about the achievement gap, if they're aware of it, and if they did, what do they know about it?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of obvious, the achievement gap, you kind of tell. And I feel because, like, more so when I was in middle school, there were, like, obviously students that, like, weren't understanding the work that we were being taught. And there was, like, a lack of attention there. Like, the students that understood it, stuff kept going. And for, like, that just didn't understand a certain subject or didn't understand anything at all, they weren't getting any help. So it's obvious that there is an achievement gap.
In middle school, you started to notice that, where some kids were already kind of, either at least at grade level or accelerating, while others were already falling behind.
Yeah, and I feel like when it keeps going, it builds it up. So by the time we got to high school, it was already it's already bad, because then stuff in high school goes even faster. Everything that wasn't learned or even special attention to in middle school, you just don't have. I think, to be honest, I think that it was more so because of the color of the student's skin. If you pay attention to, like, the kids that were falling back more, or more kids of color than anything, like, it would be the students that were either always getting in trouble, always being sent outside of the classroom, that needed the time in the classroom. But those were the students that were falling back. Those were the students that weren't getting help. Like, for myself, I've never been good at math. So math is a subject that I was never getting help with. Like, I've always had a tutor, or I had to figure a way out to do it on my own and had to stay up, because we weren't getting help. I wasn't getting help in math, so I kind of just fall behind. Like, every year I do good in everything else, but I fall behind in my math. Like, it never fails, and there's no help because it just keeps going faster and faster.
Yeah, I'm aware of it. Like, we had a BSU meeting, Black Student Union, and Mr. Milton, I don't remember when this was, but it was sometime during my high school career, where basically he was just telling us that, like, we have, like, an achievement gap. Like, the Black students are at a way lower rate to graduate than the white students at our school. So he was basically just trying to, like, tell us, like, we need to get this together as a community, help each other out, and, like, get our grades up so we won't be a percentage known in MMSD.
Yes, I would say that I'm aware of it. And, like, I guess, like, the basic definition I have is that it's, like, Black students aren't achieving as high as white students, and there's this big gap between, like, their achievement, basically.
But when did you first become aware of it?
I wouldn't say that, like, I've experienced it, but I feel like I've started to have conversations with, like, administrators about it, like, always getting invited to, like, panels to talk about, like, what we as Black students think they can do about it. And I think that those conversations started around middle school, honestly. So I've known about it.
Oh, wow.
Definitely I know of it, and, like, I see it clearly. I feel like just going to it's pretty clear to me, just because, like, most of the AP classes, it's full of white people, and there's no colored person in the class. All the honors classes, it's only white people. So that just yells out, like, the problem.
So that kind of just highlights for you, by just seeing representation in classrooms that in essence should be more diverse but aren't.
Right.
Yes, I'm very aware of the achievement gap, and honestly, I feel like a lot of students don't get to achieve graduating high school or their goals in high school because where they come from, or the mindset of thinking that they can't do it and teachers not being there to support them. I honestly think teachers they have lost like the passion of teaching students, and I feel like it's gotten to the point now where they only teach to feed their families. I feel like they don't look at it from a child's perspective because they don't want to, or they don't care to nowadays. I mean, especially at the school I used to go to. So yes, I definitely do see that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Olga being a student at Test. I was there like my full sophomore year. And I actually almost wrote a paper on it. So I did like some of the research on like the profiles. And it's like super disheartening to see the numbers. If you go to like the DPI, you can just like see like the graduation rates like lowering and like the dropout rates going higher. I think the biggest thing that I've seen is I was a TA my junior year, and I TA'd for honors history and then just regular history. Okay. And to see that the honors history was almost all white kids and that the regular history class was almost all student of color. And not only that, but there were students in there who were freshmen in high school who like needed us to read to them, who they couldn't read. And you can just see fell through the cracks and told me, I'm just going to drop out. School's too hard. They don't care about me.
As you can see with the first part of the interviews from the students, and these students are representing almost all of the high schools in Madison: East, West, La Follette, Memorial, Shabazz, Capitol High East, Capitol High West. It's very interesting to me that even though that there are different schools, that they are picking up and seeing a lot of the same things play out and repeat themselves. And it was incredible to, as I'm editing this podcast and taking all these different Zoom interviews from people at different schools, of how much overlap there was. You can see that a lot of the students, especially those that are high academic achievers, feel alone in much of their AP classes because they are the only person of color in that class in many instances. And, they also see it, as they're younger and they're moving through the district, they're able to see that some of their peers are falling through the cracks. And as one student put it, by the time they get to high school, they just give up. It's incredible what these students have been able to see and to pick up and to analyze. But don't go anywhere. We're going to have more of these interviews coming up right after this. What's good, everybody? This is Pick Up the Mic podcast with your host, Corey Whitmore. We are back, and this is episode 1, and we are talking about achievement gap. What is it? Why is it important? We are talking to our high school juniors and seniors in the district and really getting their count on what they think that it is, if they've been aware of it, and kind of from their point of view, what have they seen?
Yeah, I'm definitely aware of it. Because personally, I'm taking like 5 AP classes, and in 4 of those AP classes, I'm one of like 2 Black people, and I'm gonna go the other way and say that it has gotten like a lot better, because in my AP chemistry class, I'm pretty sure at least half of them are half of the people in there are minorities. So it has gotten a lot better, because I know last year it was a lot worse.
I have heard about the achievement gap because mostly my parent is a teacher, so I'm very familiar with that topic in my household. And it's I guess it's an issue that the district hasn't really been up to date with like they don't really talk about it as they should.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is solution.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem is how to come up with that solution.
Right. Right.
Well, much like DD said, a lot of Black students aren't as encouraged as white students to try to push themselves to those upper level classes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that myself. Like last year I was taking pre-calc and there was like 2 Black students with me in that class. Well, me and another Black student in that class. And the rest of them were pretty much white. So I feel like a lot of Black students that are even in higher level classes are not encouraged to stay in them. They're given the opportunity to drop out of those classes instead of being encouraged to stay in those classes and try harder than they already are.
I think if I'm right, I think I've been hearing about it on and off since like kindergarten when they had like the No Child Left Behind. And I remember like a lot of the white students left the elementary school that I was in, which was fairly students of color almost entirely. So I think it's really interesting just to see like how, although like they're supposed to, not have people get left behind and this big improvement in education, I don't know how much that's really changed. Because there's obviously peers that have, they've just kind of been forgotten in the system or they've been sent to alternative schools and could be more up to date and more relevant to what it's like to be a student of color. Because initially, it was, a lot of white students and then some students of color, but now with, especially like with having a lot of students of color in other high schools, it needs to be addressed properly.
It definitely does need to be addressed properly. And we're here in this podcast is trying to figure out the best ways to move forward in addressing that gap. And what also came out in a lot of these interviews was the phrasing, subtle phrases that were similar but different. And, I referenced teachforamerica.org. They had an article in 2008 titled "Why We Say Opportunity Gap Instead of Achievement Gap." The article goes to say that the phrase achievement gap is commonly used in education-related conversations, media reports, scholarships, and teacher training materials. It is a term that refers to the disparity in academic outcomes between lower-income students, who often are people of color, non-native English speakers, and those living in rural communities and their affluent peers. In recent years, Teach for America has joined other organizations and education experts in shifting the term opportunity gap, as we think more precisely names the situation of our country. Opportunity gap refers to the fact that the arbitrary circumstances in which people are born, such as race, ethnicity, zip code, socioeconomic status, determine their opportunities in life, rather than all people having the chance to achieve to the best of their potential. Opportunity gap draws attention to the conditions and obstacles that young students face throughout their educational careers. It therefore accurately places responsibility on an inequitable system that is not providing the opportunities for all kids to thrive and succeed. While a shift in terminology may not solve the pervasive inequities students face, words have meaning. We believe it is important to use language in a solution-oriented way that promotes systematic reform and empowers communities to demand more. Let's listen to some of our community leaders and another one of our students on why they believe opportunity gap is how we should be classifying this problem.
I don't like to call it an achievement gap. I see it more as an opportunity gap. And I also feel like, okay. Yes or no.
Okay. That course of thinking and why you prefer to use opportunity gap versus achievement gap.
See, I know that oftentimes in our district that we have, we're not holding Black students accountable for their, success in academics. And so I feel like when we're not being held accountable, when we're not being offered resources that can, help us succeed, then it's not exactly an achievement gap. And like also like in the past, we have always been like a group that has been oppressed. So we haven't been offered these resources that could potentially get us to the same point as white students in this case. And so I feel like, to me, it's more of like we haven't been offered these opportunities to be successful, whereas we've just we call it an achievement gap now because it seems like we're offered the same opportunities, but I still feel like we're not.
Can I follow up with that? And not to put you on the spot, but you've highlighted that there's a difference between opportunities that are given to Black students versus white students. Can you highlight 2 or 3 of those opportunities that you feel that have not been afforded to Black students but have been afforded to white students?
I feel like a lot of times we are encouraging, or we fail to encourage, Black students to join higher level classes. They're kind of pushed out of them. And then like the environment in those classes aren't like tailored to the experiences of students of color in general. So it's like easy for us to not get the same kind of preparation that we would need to, succeed on those tests that you're speaking of, or like, have success in graduation, essentially.
When I talk about the achievement gap, specifically in the Madison Metropolitan School District, some people have named it an opportunity gap, not an achievement gap, and everybody seems to have a different understanding of what it is. So my first question really is what do you know about the achievement gap here in Madison, and what does that mean to you when you hear the word achievement gap?
I mean, because it does have a lot of layers, because it's not just all schools, so it's socioeconomic too. So, I think to me, that's the one contributing thing, lack of like some type of resources, like reach out to make sure everybody's like secure. You got hands around all the kids. That's missing sometimes. You try to have these programs, but I think really what I've been seeing, socioeconomic factors lead to when we get to school, then we come into the school, it's like it's not all the focus it should be, or it's not the priority. And this is no fault of anyone's, because there's a lot of different factors working. So, and then the reason, like I say, you have these gaps also is because it's not just based off grades. It's based off standardized testing. So, with that, it's already uneven with the playing field when you're critiquing and judging. Like you said, like that's what those things do. They judge the school system and they judge students, for their lack of anything, So, yeah, that question has a lot of layers. Like we say, achievement gap, like contributing factors. It's a lot of things. It's the Eurocentric view through which Madison school system has been running for years, and having to change that. That's going to take time. So this year has been all the focus on, anti-racist teaching. Trying to undo some of these things that they know have become systematic within the system that I work in. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know that back in 1989, I was working in one of the Madison schools, and I was a part of the School of Hope program, looking at disparity and looking at how kids are achieving. And some of those same statistics still exist now, over 25, 30 years later. And what I also realize is that when you are in a relationship with a lot of these young folks, their conversations will lead you to believe that there are some major issues that needs to be addressed, that their learning style, given the opportunity to achieve and excel, is something that they talk about on a consistent basis. And that, it is important for the districts to realize that we need to make some decisions and focus on how we can best help our young people achieve and respect and appreciate their learning styles.
Right.
And I agree with Cliff in that. And I know that minority youth continue to be overrepresented in like special educational programs for the learning disabled and in segregated classrooms for those with emotional problems. At the same time, though, they continue to be underrepresented in programs for gifted and talented students.
I really look at it more of an opportunity gap, the opportunity of what one set of families versus another set. Divided line really between our Black and white families, if you want to be more specific. Yes, the opportunities. And we can use this pandemic as a huge example of what it meant when families, oh my goodness, we're a year now into the pandemic, and what it meant this time last year, where everything had to shut down, the schools shut, the state shut down, and you're at home in a sense and had to learn from home. And then you start learning about the access of being able to have reliable internet access to learn or educationally over the computer. And you learn about the access of who has that freedom or have that opportunity to sit in a quiet space to learn versus not having that space to learn. And it really opened up what it meant to have a roof over your head. You make the assumption that when students come into your classroom, that they have the basic needs met, and you learn that that's not always the case with food insecurity and housing insecurity. You really get to find out, you really get to know the opportunity gaps that is widened because of what occurred specifically with this pandemic for all, or even having parents having the capability to work from home as opposed to being an essential worker where you have to be out in retail stores, for example, or at the grocery stores or so, and not being there next to your child to help them with the assignments or the work. I mean, with Sun Prairie in the headline in the news now with the incident at Patrick Marsh Middle School with the history lesson gone bad, and that would this have happened if we were all in person? It just opened up the eyes of, okay, your child is trying to learn at home and this assignment comes up and you can ask your mom, who so happening was right there, to say, Mom, does this assignment look right? What kind of question is this? Would this have happened if we were in person? And that brings up another whole host of questions looking at our curriculum. Like, okay, let's see. Can't tell me this was the first time this has happened. No, this is the first time this has happened where someone is questioning you while you're at home, working from home. So when we talk about the achievement gap, I would look at it more as the opportunity gap, and then just making sure that what our students are learning is more culturally relevant so that you can get a grasp of understanding more than what's been in these books that even when I was a child that I never thought was a lot appropriate. That's another whole story in itself in here. So that whole achievement gap could be something that just wasn't right from the get-go.
Right.
So it's the opportunity.
And it's funny that you use, that titling of opportunity gap, because there's a young man from C that I was talking to that used that exact same terminology in speaking about this. And he, in his opinion, he corrected me right away to say, I know that you're asking me about an achievement gap, but I believe that it's an opportunity gap, and here's why.
That's right. Good deal.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to continue with more Pick Up the Mic podcast right after this break. Welcome back, everyone, to Pick Up the Mic podcast with your host, Corey Whitmore. This is episode 1, the achievement gap. What is it? Why is it important? And in our last segment, we really talked about, the difference in terminology. In many of the papers, they'll have achievement gap, but many people feel that is an opportunity gap. Opportunity gap referring more to the inputs, the causes, the unequal or inequitable distribution of resources and opportunities. While the achievement gap kind of more refers to, the outputs. What are the results? And, we'll get into that in episode 2, but those results of how does this show up in testing? How does this show up in graduation rates? How does this show up in ACT scores and all types of different things? So that's something that I had to learn coming into this. As a parent, as a father to 2 boys, education, I'm getting more and more involved as they continue to grow up about their education and their educational opportunities and what is going on in the school and what type of learning environment are you providing my boys. And that's important. That's important for every parent to analyze and to want the best for your son or daughter to be able to succeed when it comes to school. So I have one more in a portion of an interview I want to get to with Dr. Rainey Briggs, who took almost everything that I said, asking him about, what do you feel about this achievement gap? What does that mean to you? Is it an opportunity gap or is it an achievement gap? Is it both? And somehow this brother put both of those ideas together and came up with another term that I really loved. So let's go and for our last portion of episode 1, let's listen to Dr. Rainey Briggs and how he answered this interesting question. Let's start here. So the quote unquote term that you keep hearing, especially when I look back in the papers, is quote unquote achievement gap.
Yeah.
As I've gotten in these conversations, some people call it different things.
Yep.
Some people term it different. I had a conversation 2 days ago and the gentleman I was talking to made me feel like that was a lazy term because it doesn't quite get to the heart of what's going on. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, what do you know about the achievement gap since you've been here, in the area, not specifically just Madison, and what does that mean to you when you hear that term?
Oh my goodness, my brother. I would, whoever that was that talked to you or made you feel like it's such a lazy term, it's what across the country is used to define the gaps that exist between our students of color, particularly our Black students,
right,
and white students. And it's that comparison that's always to white kids, right? But what I would say more than anything, man, as opposed to the achievement gap, is I would lean a little bit more into the belief gap, right? If people believed that kids if they believed in kids' ability, if they believed in kids' capabilities, I almost wonder, would there be such a thing as an achievement gap? Like when somebody believes that you can do something, they show it to you. You as a student feel like, yep, this particular person, teacher, family, friend, mom, dad, whoever, they truly believe in me and know that I can do something that I sometimes don't believe in myself can do. And that's where that belief gap, to me, more than achievement gap comes in, because I think the belief gap contributes to the achievement gap. right? If you believe that you can achieve, remember that statement out there, if you believe it, you can achieve it.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yep.
And if you go back to the years when that statement first came out, I don't know when it first came, but if you think about it, if you believe it, you can achieve it. Right. And when you look at, if you believe in this particular group of students, they will show you the achievement. You will believe in them enough to support them through those different achievements that we hope to see. That we believe can happen for our kids of color. But if we don't believe in the kids, we won't see a change in the achievement gap. Bottom line, we won't see a change in it. And that achievement gap has existed for years. Man, we can go all the way back to slavery. We can go all the way back to the point in which it was illegal to read and write.
Right.
And the only group of people that suffered from that were Black people. Right? We got lynched, we got whipped, we got, punished for knowing how to read. Right? And if you think about reading back then, and then the different generations that kind of went through that, not being allowed to read or against the law to read, then you think generation upon generation, these folks could not read to their kids.
Right.
So now just think about where we are today. If you had those starting generations not being able to read, and then they started having kids, then they couldn't read. Then they started having kids. They weren't allowed to read. They started having kids and they didn't care to read.
Right.
It wasn't important because they didn't know much about it. But then we started to see it in our educational system. We started to see it cause for incarceration to arise because people didn't have the skills and the abilities to afford themselves the opportunity to not be caught in situations that warranted them to go to jail or to prison.
Right.
So that prison, that school to prison pipeline. Right, it's real, bro. It's real. And I think that's where when I hear the achievement gap, I would almost agree with whoever you spoke with. That the achievement gap is really lazy. It's a lazy term to be used to express and to identify who we are as people of color. So that's where I would lean more into the belief gap. If you believe in me, you're bound to see something more out of me.
Thank you, Dr. Rainey Briggs, for that. The belief gap. First time I heard that, I didn't even know what to really say. I mean, it was incredible, and I love how he uses that belief gap to really get at the heart of why we are not getting those results that we hoped and that we should be getting, and particularly with students of color, and what contributes to where we started this conversation when addressing the achievement gap. So I hope you enjoyed a lot of the conversations and the different point of views that were a part of this first episode. We went from achievement gap to opportunity gap to belief gap. So we've been on quite a journey. I want to leave you with two more things before we conclude this episode. First is two quotes. There's two quotes that really stand out to me, because we talk about why it's important. Yeah, we've talked about what it is and what the kids are seeing and what some of the people in the community are seeing, and we've even started to get into certain reasons why they believe this is happening. But the importance of education cannot be understated. One quote that I love is from Frederick Douglass, and he says, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." And building an education is an essential part of building strong children and giving them the opportunity and the ability to navigate the system and be able to move forward and succeed. It is not the only thing that can help move them towards that, but I do believe it is an important element. The other quote that That when I think education, I always think of is one by Malcolm X. Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare today. And my question right now is our school system preparing our children for tomorrow? Is the belief there, and that these children can achieve and can exceed academically like their white counterparts? Is that belief there? Is the environment there? Is the environment conducive to allowing these children to grow and to mature and to excel? Is the school providing that environment? Are the teachers providing that belief? That's something that we'll go into a little bit more in this podcast. So something to think about. The last thing I wanted to share with everybody, at the end of every podcast, we are going to highlight teachers, counselors, coaches. We're going to highlight people within the Madison Metropolitan School District that have had a profound positive effect on the kids in it. So at the end of all of these interviews that I had with the students, I asked them to name one person that had a positive influence on them from the district. And we got so I wish we had time to share all the different teachers, counselors, coaches that have a positive impact. So we're going to do that at the end of each episode, and we're going to do that here in a minute. What I want people also to take away is this podcast is just giving a glimpse into some of the community's perspectives and ideas on how to try and close that gap. I would say, to definitely take into account what's been shared here. Of course, it's been some incredible point of view, some incredible ideas that have been shared in this podcast, but to also look at these individuals that we are highlighting at the end of each episode, because these individuals have made positive impacts on students within the district. It took these students 2 seconds, if that, to say, this is the person I want to shout out and I want to highlight, and this is why, this is what they did for me. So another source of where you may be able to find some answers or an additional perspective on how to close this gap may be these very people that these kids are naming at the end of each episode. So I'm gonna leave you with that. Thank you for your time. We'll see you next week, Sunday at 6 p.m. For episode 2, where we'll be talking about standardized testing in the forward exam. Thank you. Is there a teacher, a mentor, a coach, counselor, somebody that has had a profound positive impact on you and has helped you grow?
I have 2. Miss Hawk, she was a social worker / counselor at West, and I think that I had a really hard time in high school with personal things and school things, and that if I didn't have her, I probably would have been in a worse place than I was. She definitely helped me with navigating school and my personal life. And another teacher that I would like to give a shout out to is Mr. Eccles. I went to an alternative school last year, and he was the first teacher who saw me doing bad in school and knew it was because I wasn't trying and not because I couldn't do it. And he pressed me on trying, and he would always have these real talks, as he would call them, and he would really, it was like he was reading me. It was like I was a book and he was reading it, because he would tell me things that usually is what I tell a teacher. Mm-hmm. And he's like, and I know he approached it, me not doing the best, in a different way than I've had other teachers do. I've had other teachers tell me, if I keep on going down this path, this and this is going to happen. Where instead he was like, I know you can do this, and you need to get off your butt and stop being lazy and do the work that I know you can do. And so I think that both of them were definitely a good positive role for me that helped me realize some things for myself. And this concludes the first episode of Pick Up the Mic podcast
on WWMV-LP 95.5 and Radio 22. Man, I can't wait for next week. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.